Awesome. All right. And we have a great talk coming up on .NET 7 on App Service and bulk migration. They have a ton of stuff to cover. So I told them we can start them early. So welcome, Byron and Gaurav.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for joining. My name is Byron Tardif. I'm a Principal Program Manager with the App Service team. And I'm joined today by Gaurav, who is also PM on the team. I'll let you introduce yourself, Gaurav.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gaurav. I'm a PM on the Azure App Services team. Over to you, Byron.
All right.
So the reason... Awesome. Thank you, John. The reason we're here is obviously .NET 7 came out, and if you notice, we had day zero support on App Service like is tradition now. This is the third year in a row. We started .NET 5, .NET 6, and now .NET 7. There's a couple of things that I want to point people to. We have the App Service team blog where you can read all about, how we do this, what is the new things coming in App Service, not just related to .NET, but we support Python and Node and Java and all of these different languages. So you can get news directly from the team. So this is people like Gaurav and me actually writing those in-depth technical articles. One of the best articles that we have that came out this year was the collaboration that we did with the .NET team to migrate some of our key infrastructure, that's the front-end role in App Service, to use the new Kestrel and YARP components that are part of the .NET framework. And there's a very in-depth article there that you can go read to learn a little bit more about how we run this type of services at scale with the help from .NET and the .NET team. Specifically, .NET 7 and the way that we do day zero releases is another interesting read. And we use this mechanism that we call early access that allows us to do that blast, where when you think of App Service, it's millions and millions of VMs distributed across the world. And we need to be able to push these updates without disrupting services. And it was especially important this year because .NET 7 release date was exactly the same as the major US elections. So how do we do this without disrupting and with enabling people to follow along with the demos? That is like a very important thing for us to make sure that you can see what's going on in the keynote and then go grab those same bits and run that same app and publish it on App Service, and everything just works magically starting from day zero. So that's where you can learn a little bit more about that. And then finally, we do have a Twitter account. This is, again, it's not a marketing Twitter. It's like real people from the product team that are managing it, answering questions, and posting news. So that's another good way to reach the actual product team working on App Service. And with that, I'm going to switch over to my first demo. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something very, very simple, just for the spirit of showing, getting .NET 7 running on App Service on day zero. And I'm starting with this. It's literally an empty directory. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new directory for my demo. And I'm going to call it .NET Conf. There we go. So now I have that. Now I'm going to go into my directory, and I'm going to do .NET new. Oh, let me first .NET info. And we're going to see that pretty much the only thing I have here is I have the .NET 7 SDK installed on this machine. So now let's do .NET new web app. And what this does is it gives me some scaffolding so that I have like a simple hello world type of application that's going to be up in here in my local machine. I can look into that. I can look into the .NET Proj to confirm that this is actually a .NET 7 app. There we go. And now this is what I call the fastest way to get started with App Service. I have a simple app or a complex app. It doesn't really matter. I can do AC, which is from the Azure CLI, AC web app. And literally, that's the only command that I need to run to grab my application, package it, publish it to the cloud, and get it up and running. I like to do it a little bit more, a little bit more sophisticated than that. So this is the command that I'm going to run, and I'm going to explain you what I'm doing here. So AC web app up, that's the base command. Then I want to put it in a resource group, which is the .NET Conf resource group. I want my instance to be Linux because in the app service team, I own all of the Linux workloads, so I want to create more Linux apps. This queue, this is basically what is the underlying compute that is going to be serving my app. So I want to do premium v2. And then this last one, what it does is it will pop open the browser as soon as my app is deployed and ready to go. So with that, let's go and execute that. Now, behind the scenes, what's happening is, if you notice, I didn't give any information to the command as to what app I'm actually running. So there's some intelligence behind the scenes that what it's doing is it's looking at what's there, and we're able to determine if this is a .NET app or a Python or a Node app, and do the right thing as far as making sure that we're configuring the app service to set up the right runtime. The other thing that it does is, since I'm running it for the first time, there needs to be some infrastructure on Azure side to be able to host the app. So what you're seeing happening right now is exactly that, right? So it's creating a resource group. The resource group is like that folder where your app is going to live. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go create the app service plan, which is the abstraction of compute. And then once the app service plan is there, we're going to go and we're going to create the app where your code is actually going to be hosted. So this usually takes between 2 to 3 minutes, depending on how fast things are running on the cloud. But while that is going over there, what I'm going to do is we're going to do AC web app H. And the only thing I want to show you here is that you can be as simple as just running AC web app up, or you can get as complicated as you want, or as specific as you want with what type of application do you actually want to run. I forgot to include the up sub command here, so there we go. So you can do things like specify the location, the size. Let me do this just so it's easier to read. You can turn the logs on. You can basically define the runtime that you want to use if you don't want to rely on auto detect. So there's a lot of good functionality here. Okay, so while this is still going on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over here, and let's take a look at Azure to see where things are right now. So now I have the resource group. And in that resource group, I can see that I have the app service plan and the web app. And then sometimes this runs faster than the actual command. But if I hit browse, oh no, it's still going through deployment motions. So, okay, what's going on at this point? So we talked about, we've created the resource group, the app service plan, and the web app. Now, the next step is actually configuring the web app, right? So it's telling it, okay, you're not just like a generic web app. You actually need to run .NET. So that's where the Linux FX version comes into play, and we tell you what runtime you're targeting. Next is we're doing the deployment. So what this is happening is it's grabbing the code that I have locally, packing it up as a zip file, and then it's pushing it up to the web app. So this is basically telling you, yeah, we completed the action of copying the bits over to the Linux instance. Now, if you notice, this was never compiled. So the next thing that's happening is it's going to be compiled behind the scenes on the app service side. And then now that everything got done, it's telling me, okay, the thing got done. So now my app would probably be going through cold start. And now there we go. So I have an app up and running. All I had to do was run one command. And even if it was .NET 7 from day 0, you would have gotten this to work. For those of you that are keen observers, the .NET Conf website is actually running on App Service and is running on .NET 7. And it literally took them, I think it was Monday afternoon. The site was already deployed with .NET 6. They updated one config, pushed a new build, and now it's running on .NET 7. So that's how fast and how reliable the infrastructure and the process we use to deploy .NET 7 and get .NET 7 support for all of you built out. So with that, the only thing left is talking about some of the work that we've been doing with the .NET team and how we consume .NET inside of the product is enabling new features for App Service. The one that we've talked about recently is gRPC support. So with the work that we did for the front end and that modernization of that infrastructure, we're now able to support gRPC workloads, not just for .NET, but for Python, Node, etc. And we're also working on enabling some of the more customer-requested scenarios that should be coming out pretty soon, which includes things like, for example, having customer pages. So the scenario there is there's a request going to your application, there's something wrong with your app, so your app is obviously not going to be able to respond with a customer error page, but that can be handled at the front end, right? And we're giving you the opportunity to add that branding. The other important one that is coming is giving you the ability. This is something that you can already do with app service environments, but being able to do it at the public multi-tenant level, which is configuring what cipher suites you want to select. So if you need more security, you can actually exclude certain cipher suites from being valid. And then all of that auto negotiation happens at the front end, and you get the request on your application with just the cipher suites that you decide to support. That wraps it up for me. Thank you very much, and I'll pass it on to you, Gaurav, where you're going to talk to us about migration.
Thanks, Byron. So Byron spoke about all the good things that's coming there, like day zero support for .NET 7. But what most of our customers still have applications which may be legacy or could be older frameworks, and basically they are looking to migrate these ASP.NET web applications over to Azure App Services. Now, for past I can say more than 2 years, we already have the App Services Migration Assistant tool, which is like standalone tool in nature, already available for our customers to migrate an ASP.NET web application to Azure App Services. Now, the way the tool works is it basically discovers, assesses, and allows you to migrate one web application at a time. But what if you are looking at migrating hundreds and hundreds of ASP.NET web applications over to Azure App Services? And that's where we've been working very closely with the Azure Migrate team on lighting up the whole bulk discovery, assessment, and migration scenarios for ASP.NET web applications. Now, before I get into the demo of the whole bulk motion for migration, I also want to talk about the another tooling, the scripted experience for migration that's also available for you to use. So now, as I said, that standalone tool is all about one web application at a time. There will always be a scenario where you want to migrate entire IIS web server, and that is where PowerShell scripts come into the picture. So we also have an experience where you can download these PowerShell scripts. You just unzip the skills, the scripts, and just go execute them. And what they do behind the scene is they go ahead and let you discover all the web applications on the IIS web server, assess them, and then migrate the config and content over for all the web applications to Azure App Services. Now, for the PowerShell scripts specifically, I want to talk about two more things. One being, you can also use them in more like online, offline scenario, meaning if you have your IIS web server on a VM, which doesn't have internet access, maybe because of security reasons, in that scenario, you could go ahead and discover and assess your web applications, but then you can always package the content on the VM, copy the content over to a different virtual machine which does have internet access, and then again run the whole migration part of the scripts and migrate the content over to Azure App Services. So that's what I meant by online offline scenarios. And the other important point here is that if you are already having your web application, say on an Azure VM, what we call as IaaS. So if you're already on an Azure VM and you want to move your ASP.NET Web application from an Azure VM over to App Services, again, you can use PowerShell script. So the idea here is you could do the same discovery, assessment, and migration of your web application from an Azure VM over to Azure App Services, either using the standalone migration tool if you want to do one web application at a time, or if you want to move the entire web server, look at using PowerShell scripts. Now, having said that, let me get into the demo of doing the whole bulk experience for discovery, assessment, and migration. Now, as some of you would be aware that Azure Migrate is the centerpiece of pretty much all things migration on Azure today, be it virtual machines, be it databases, or VMware environments. It's all about Azure Migrate. So what we did, we collaborated with Azure Migrate team, and we now have the capability to do a bulk discovery, assessment, and migration of ASP.NET Web applications. And the way it all starts is you basically go ahead and download the migration appliance. And once you download the migration appliance into your data center and do the basic required configurations, that's where the discovery process kicks in. So what we do as part of the discovery, as you can see here, is we want to discover all the servers that, and a quick call out here is right now the experience is supporting VMware environments only. So like you need to get this appliance and configure in your VMware environment. We go ahead and discover all the servers, and then we come back and tell you out of these servers, which servers are running SQL Server and which servers are hosting IS Web Server. So let me specifically get into the servers which are hosting IS web application. So once I get in, basically we will get to see details about every individual web server. So we'll know the name, we know the IP addresses, the software inventory. Again, the way things work over here is we create the different applications which are installed on these individual servers, and using the roles and features of Windows Server, we basically figure out if you have IS Web Server configured. And once we know that, we can basically, we also give you details about the cores, the memory, the disk storage, and how many web applications are there on these individual web servers. So if you see, we have all these web applications hosted on this web server. Now I can again get into this individual web application and see all the metadata that we have discovered. So what we discover is the URLs, what's the protocol, what port it is listening on, what application pose, authentication type, connection strings, and any application directories. Now, you can see that we also discovered the frameworks, and we will discover all the web applications on every individual IS web server. And for any reason, if you cannot discover the web servers and applications running on those, we also go ahead and try and give you the some of the troubleshooting steps. So like if you see we have discovery pending for one of these web servers. This web server has like in excess of 50 web applications. And let me just pick up any random web application. Again, you can see we have discovered all the metadata over here. Now, once the discovery is done, and again, just a quick call out on the discovery piece is, discovery is pretty much automated in nature, meaning once you have configured the appliance and the discovery is kick-started, beyond that, you really don't need to do much of a configuration. We discover the servers and give you the information on this dashboard. Now, once the discovery is done, the next step is basically to go ahead and start the assessment. Now, the word assessment, basically what we are trying to do here is we are trying to assess your web applications for fitment of these applications to Azure App Services. So basically, behind the scene, what we do is we run a host of readiness checks against individual web applications. And when I say readiness checks, we validate things like what port your web application is running on, what kind of application pools you're using, like is it a single app pool or multiple application pools, or what's the protocol that you're using to host your web application on premises. Now, the reason we do all of this is, take for example, Azure App Services allows you to receive traffic for your web application on port 80 or 443, and maybe you are using say port 9000 for your web application. Now in that case, your web application will still get migrated, but will not be available on port 9000, but will in fact be available on port 80 or 443. So these are different checks that we basically go ahead and perform as part of assessment. Now, okay, before I get into any existing assessment, let me show you how you can create a new assessment. So you get into Azure App Services, and then to define an assessment, basically you go ahead, click on edit, and you give all the different properties. So now, what is the location? Location meaning which Azure region do you intend to migrate your web application? Now, isolation over here basically means, are you targeting your web applications for app services environment? So basically, if you have a requirement to kind of isolate your web app deployment like within your virtual network, and you are in a secure environment, you basically want to explore the possibility of using app services environment. Are you willing to use the reserved instance pricing again, because that's like from a monetary aspect benefit for you? And what kind of licensing program you are wanting to use. So maybe, in the interest of time, I've already created an assessment. So like if I get into this assessment over here, which I've already created, once the assessment is complete, what we do is we come back and give you this dashboard where we show you which all applications are ready for migration, ready with conditions, and not ready. Now, ready with for migration means you don't need to make any change to your web applications, and the web applications are ready to be migrated to Azure App Services as is. Now, when I say ready with condition, basically going back to the example that if your application was hosted on port 9000, it will still be migrated to Azure App Services, but now the traffic will be available on port 80 and 443. So that's the kind of ready with condition that categorization that I'm trying to talk about. Other example could be the application pools. Now, what about not ready? So now if you are using, say, a TCP protocol to host your web application, of course, that's not ready for Azure App Services, because we only allow HTTP and HTTPS as a protocol to host your web applications. Now, if I get into any ready with conditions web application, see here, obviously I won't have any issues, which is errors, but I do have tons of warnings. So if you see, we are probably using an authentication type which is not supported on Azure App Services, or maybe we are using different ports. Like this application on premises uses port 44,368, whereas once it is migrated to App Services, it will be port 80 or 443. So that's what we mean by warnings over here, and that's what we mean by App Services ready with conditions for migration to App Services. Now, having said that, one very important point that I want to mention here is that we don't run a code scan on your web application. Basically, the readiness checks over here are limited to configurations only. Now, in addition to the categorization of your web application, we also give you a monthly cost estimate. So basically what we do is, based on years of experience of hosting web applications for customers, basically we have this whole sizing logic behind the scene, where currently, based on your web applications, we are saying that maybe for a single instance of P1 V3, we could package 16 web applications into an app service plan. And based on that logic, we come back and give you a monthly cost estimate that how many app service plans would be created for your app. Now, again, the question could be, can I change? Yes, you can change this queue type as part of the migration experience. So now let me quickly jump into the whole migration experience. And now once the discovery and the assessment is complete, now we get into the migration. And to kickstart migration, you basically from the migration tool tile, you need to click on the replicate gesture. Now on the replicate gesture, you start by specifying the intent of migration, which is that I want to migrate to ASP.NET Web Apps. What's the migration target for these ASP.NET Web Apps? Currently, it's App Services Core. What is the kind of virtualization? Right now, the supported virtualization is VMware, and we need to select an assessment from which we want to pull the web applications for migration. So in this case, I would say the assessment that I created. Now, once I click on continue, I basically get into the step where I'll have to provide the subscription, the resource group that I want to use. So maybe I'll just use a simple resource group, any location that you prefer to, and a storage account. Now remember, the storage account in this case we use for as an intermediate storage for your content. So what happens is we will go ahead and create empty web applications, and then as a final step we'll package all the config and content storage in the storage account, and then you map it to your web application which was already created in the step here for your Azure Web Apps. Now once I click next, basically what I'm going to do here is we will show you the list of all the web applications which are part of this assessment. Now you can see that by default, all the web applications which were reported as ready, the will migrate flag is set as yes. So basically these are the only web applications which by default will be tagged for migration. Now, if you want to migrate a ready with condition web application, you simply need to click on edit and set the will migrate flag as yes. You can also do it in bulk, like maybe I can select multiple web applications, click on edit, click on will migrate as yes, and yes. Now these web applications will also be tagged for migration. On this page, if I want, I can also go ahead and individually change the name of the target web application, or I can change the app service plan if the need be. Now on the next screen, I get to see again the name of the different app services plans which will be created. Now, I can either change the name of the app service plan, or I can even change the SKU of these app service plans. So maybe just in the interest of demo, I will go ahead and change the SKU to standard S1, and maybe I'll change this one to standard S3. And then I click on review plus create. Now on this final screen, basically what we are doing is we are validating the whole deployment template behind the scene. Now you can also see that we also give you like kind of a list of what is the name of your web application, the imported web app, what would be the target name, and what's the target app service plan name. You can download all of these details as a CSV, and then you click on the migrate button. Now what happens is once you click on the migrate button, we start creating the storage account, we create the app service plan, we create all the individual web applications, and then we start copying the content and config over to the storage account that I showed you in the step 1. And then we eventually at the last step of the migration, before we complete it, we basically map the content and config over to the individual web application. Now you can see as part of this process, this is one of the web applications, our very own Parts Unlimited, which is part of Contoso that I have already migrated to Azure App Services. Now, as Byron briefly mentioned, now once you're already in Azure App Services, what are some of the benefits that you can derive of migrating your web applications to Azure App Services? Could be as simple as you could like readily scale out your web applications. And again, the action could be manual, or it could be based on a rule or a schedule that you define. Or you could simply scale up your web application. That is, you are adding more infrastructure to your web application. So you can simply scale up your web application post-migration. Now, you can set up all networking-related configurations. Like if you want to create a network isolation for a web application, you could do that. Or another very, very powerful feature that you could look at post-migration is that you could use the whole diagnose and solve problem experience. Like now I am in Azure App Services. I just want to do a risk assessment against my migrated web application. So what happens over here is, as part of the risk assessment, we'll give you what's the best practices that your web application is following in terms of availability or optimal configuration. So yeah, I mean, you can see that maybe, if you want to have a high availability of your web application, you need to distribute it on more than one instance. So yeah, these are all different modernization features that you can apply to your web applications post migration. And in addition to this, I mean, just to keep things simple, it is all the host of like maintenance task which gets automated for you post migration to Azure App Services. And this is like, for me, this is the single biggest reason why you should be looking to migrate your ASP.NET web applications to App Services. So yeah, I mean, that's the demo I wanted to talk about for the day.
So Gaurav, I think some of the discussion in the comments was talking about how often people like update their applications, and that's one of the beauties of App Service, that you still need to update and manage your dependencies because we don't want to break your app. Yeah. But we take care of updating and giving you the latest patch of .NET. So whenever like .NET 7 update 1 comes out in December, that's something that the platform does for you. So it's one less thing that you as a customer need to worry about. The other thing that I've heard is a lot of people, one of the biggest hurdles that they have with migration is just having an inventory of applications. So having the migration tool do that assessment and discovery is super valuable.
Yeah, thanks, Byron.
John, I think you're muted. We can't hear you.
Thank you very much. Well, that was an awesome presentation. You guys packed a ton into that amount of time, so I really appreciate it. And we're keeping on schedule, so I'm going to move on to the next session. So thanks a lot, folks.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.